Hi, welcome back to the channel. Michelle, and today I'm going to be joining in another collab video with Kara, the Mama Librarian. I will make sure to link her video down below. So today we're going to be discussing the topic of social media, specifically YouTube, and its influence on homeschooling. What we thought it would be like, and kind of, going into homeschooling, the content we consumed and how that influenced us. So I think that's a really interesting topic and something I've kind of touched on in the past in videos with someone that is specifically related to homeschooling YouTube content. So early on, I did watch homeschooling content on YouTube. So people talking about homeschooling, reviews of different curriculum. I probably started when my daughter was about 3.5, so my oldest is 12 right now, so that gives you kind of a time span of how long I've been watching homeschooling YouTube content. But early on, it was just very basic stuff. My oldest wanted to learn how to read, so I was kind of navigating that area of, well, if you're teaching your child, what does that look like? Because I did not grow up knowing any homeschoolers. All the places I lived, we've moved 3 times in the last 10 years. None of those places have been popular with homeschooling. It's never really been an option that I've explored or knew much about. So when she was 3.5 and wanted to learn things at home, I started diving into that. And one of the areas I looked at was YouTube content, because again, I didn't have a homeschooling community. I didn't know anybody that homeschooled. So I didn't have any idea of what it looked like, what curriculum was available, all those things. So in that way, it was beneficial, kind of understanding some different things of what homeschooling could be, kind of breaking that stereotypical bubble of what I think most people think homeschooling is. And it was beneficial. So I did learn some things. That's how I found all about reading. That's how I taught my oldest child to read. And I'm still currently using that curriculum. I used it with my middle child. I'm now using it with my youngest. So I do think there are some benefits that I have had from consuming YouTube content. Now, my oldest did go into public school in kindergarten, and I always kind of supplemented her education at home. So during the summer, we would work on things as well. So I still continued to consume a certain amount. I wasn't like binging homeschool content at this point, but I would consume some to get some ideas or different curriculum ideas. I was really looking at a lot of curriculum flip through videos. That was really helpful to see inside. Just to gauge how this would work for my child. And again, her main education was already being taken care of in the public school. I was just supplementing it. So fast forward, she came home for homeschooling during 3rd grade. Again, I have videos of why I decided to bring her home in 3rd grade. So that is when we full on took on homeschooling. I was the main source of her education from that. So she was in 3rd grade. She currently just finished up 6th grade, is going into 7th grade this year. So we'll be entering our 5th year of homeschooling. And I have to say, my consuming homeschool YouTube content has definitely changed over that course of those years. So early on, I think when I was looking at homeschool content, I was trying to figure out how I do this, right? And there's 2 main things that popped up in a lot of videos I consumed that I'm going to address. So one of the things that was talked about is deschooling or unschooling your kids. So if they came from a public school or private school setting and they're used to a certain structure and routine, to completely go away from that and get used to just being at home and separating school from home, all those things. I think that's bad advice. And one of the things I will say about YouTube homeschool content is there's a lot of bad advice out there, and I've seen a lot of it, and I've even taken some of that bad advice, which I'll talk about. But so for example, stepping back from structured school would not have been beneficial for my oldest child. It would have been a lot worse. All the 3 of my kids, completely different kids. I have a 12-year-old, 8-year-old, 5-year-old. They all greatly benefit from structure and routine, and to completely rip that, especially since she had kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, to completely rip that routine and structure away from her would have been harder for her to adjust to homeschooling. So as soon as I started homeschooling her full time in 3rd grade, we had a schedule, we had a plan, everyone knew what they were supposed to be doing. I was prepared to teach. I went into the school year with a plan. And will that plan be exactly what it is at the end of the school year? No, I can make adjustments, absolutely. But I needed to be the teacher in this situation and be prepared to teach so my child was ready to learn. So I think one of the things that transitioned us so well into homeschooling, even with my other two kids who have homeschooled from the beginning, is that we've always had structure and routine. That is not a negative thing, and I sometimes think in the online homeschooling community it's seen as negative. Anything that's structured or public schooly is seen as negative, but there are some positive aspects to school systems, and I think homeschoolers ignore that, or they don't want to do it, or this idea that homeschooling has to be fun all the time or pretty all the time. That's one I got right away when consuming YouTube content, is that homeschooling has to be this magical experience that's really beautiful and organic. That's not always the case. Sometimes it can be great, yes, but sometimes, usually the day-to-day stuff is kind of boring, and that's okay too. So kind of bursting that bubble that, it's not this, you'll have an image of what homeschooling is. It's not necessarily the image it's going to be for your family. Another thing I saw a lot in videos is, before you start homeschooling, find your learning style. So is your child a, kinesthetic learner, or are they an auditory learner? I think learning styles are so overdone. I do think there's benefits to understanding how your child learns, absolutely, but structuring every single detail around that, I don't think is a good idea. I think a lot of kids are, have multiple learning styles, and I think a lot of us end up being eclectic homeschoolers because, we can tailor to meet their specific needs. But I think there's so much time spent on, this is the advice to figure this out. If you've never taught your child before, that's going to be really hard. If you have no idea how your child learns, how our brains develop, how best to represent that information, it doesn't matter if you know their learning style. You can choose the exact curriculum that fits their learning style, but if you don't know how to teach it, it's going to go nowhere. And I have seen that mistake a lot on YouTube. This idea that it's not working, so let's change it. Let's change the curriculum. Let's do this. Let's not even get to the curriculum. If you don't know how to teach it, you're not going to get far. And I think there's a de-emphasis on teaching ability and skills and teacher resources used online, or at least talked about. Everyone talks about how curriculum's a tool. Absolutely. You have to know how to use those tools. So I think we need to spend more time as educators really educating ourselves, preparing ourselves to teach, because that is a really important part of our homeschooling. And it's not just how our kids learn, it's how we teach. And we need to be working on those areas too. So if this curriculum isn't working, why is it not working? I have videos where I talk about that specifically. Instead of switching, do this. But you really have to hone in on your skills, and it's an ongoing process. Just like your child is learning new things throughout the years, you're learning new teacher skills. You're learning how to adapt to that specific child, and it's not always just switching curriculum. So that is something that, again, I think was bad advice coming off the bat. And I think my first year officially homeschooling my oldest, so she would have been a third grader at that point, was intimidating. It was a lot of pressure. But I think that's good pressure. I take my child's education really serious. This isn't, just playing around. This is their future. This is how they're going to come to see the world. I need to do my part as the educator. And I think one of the reasons you see homeschooling, especially YouTube content, drop off in middle school and high school years is because it starts to get hard. It's not so fun, and, craft activities, and it's not as easy. You're starting to teach stuff you're not really familiar with. You're starting to go down avenues where you will have to put a lot more effort into it as the teacher, educator in this situation. Not a lot of people do that. Homeschooling elementary school can be pretty fun. It can be interesting. It isn't necessarily overwhelming, but once you hit those middle school, high school years, it gets real, and it gets real fast. And I think a lot of people get scared of that because they haven't been preparing themselves as the educator or their students to take on this higher level of learning and educating. So I think that first year, no matter where you land, if you start in kindergarten or if you start in fifth grade, that first year is kind of a flip-flop year. You're not sure what you're doing, you're figuring it out, and that's completely fine. My third grade year felt like that. I was really figuring out how best to educate my child. And again, I had supplemented in the past, but I had never been fully responsible for her education. So this was an experience for me, it was an experience for her, but we were both willing to learn. And I also came in with a plan, and I executed that plan best to my ability, adjusted it when it needed to. But I feel like my first year fully homeschooling, when my daughter was in 3rd grade, YouTube content almost was more negative than positive. I felt like a lot of it was disingenuous. I felt like a lot of people didn't really talk about real stuff. One of the reasons I started my own channel is because I didn't see how I homeschooled being portrayed on YouTube, so I figured I'd put it out there because I assume there's others that somehow fit into how I homeschool or the thoughts I have about homeschooling. So it's always been a beneficial thing that I'm hoping it's helpful to some people. But a lot of it, I just think I made mistakes that first year because I wasn't trusting myself, because I was so inexperienced, because I didn't have a homeschooling community. I didn't have these people to lean on, that this was a source of I could go to and get information, but not realizing that maybe the information I was getting wasn't so great, that wasn't the best advice. And, you know, I've used curriculum in the past that I think about why I use it. The Good Beautiful is an example. Looking back, I have no idea why I continued using that when it was crap. It did not work well for my family. I don't think it's a quality resource at all, but I kept going back to it year after year. Why did I keep going back to it? Because I kept seeing it pop up. This was like the heyday of Good and Beautiful, and it was super popular and super trendy, and everyone was pushing it, and I let that influence me. And because it was my first year, and I was more in a vulnerable position of self-doubt, not sure what I'm doing, and I think a lot of us imitate what we see. So that looks great, or that's really working for that homeschool family, so I'm going to use it in mine. It doesn't always work that way, and I think we need to also keep in mind that there are people who are disingenuous. There are people that are just literally pushing products, and they're trying to sell stuff to you, and that's one of the things I will never do. I will never sponsor videos or push curriculum or anything like that on this channel, because I know what it was like to be in that vulnerable position where I wasn't sure of myself, and I thought this magical unicorn curriculum would fix everything, so I bought it. Didn't work, but I kept buying it because everyone kept telling me it was a perfect curriculum. And over the years, I've learned to trust myself more, and that's just part of your homeschooling journey. What if you stay on that boat of being influenced year after year? It can really have some negative effects on your homeschooling, and that's something I definitely noticed in the beginning of my homeschool year with the content I was consuming, that it wasn't having really positive effects for me. And I think when we reach those points where we notice that something's not working, or we're not feeling bad about our homeschooling because it's not looking like, you know, the picture perfect, sitting on a picnic blanket and, you know, having poetry tea time, that it doesn't look like that it's wrong. No, I mean, the nice thing about homeschooling is that it's unique to each family, right? But are we seeing that uniqueness so much on YouTube? Or are we seeing a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same curriculum trending, a lot of the same people talking about the same stuff? I wish we saw a little bit more different homeschooling families. I do think you see different things, absolutely, but I think people only take it to a certain level. They will only share a certain side of themselves. I don't feel like there's a lot of genuine content out there that doesn't have an agenda attached to it. So that was kind of disappointing, but luckily through the years of homeschooling, I've noticed the difference of the content I consume. If it's not healthy for me to consume it, or it's not beneficial, or if it frankly just makes me really irritated to watch it, I don't watch it. And to be completely honest, I don't consume a lot of homeschool YouTube content to this day. There's a couple YouTubers I watch occasionally, but I don't really consume a lot of it. Well, back when I first started, I consumed a lot more. I think, you know, I have the training wheels are off for my homeschooling. I know what I'm doing. I'm confident in what I'm doing. I'm educating myself, which I think is really helpful. Stop looking to these YouTubers, including myself, for these magical answers. We're not experts in the field, and we're just parents trying to educate our kids, but we're also educating the kids in front of us, not your kids. So we're not experts in this field. We have experience, absolutely, and that's valid, but really understanding the kids in front of you, researching understanding how best to bring information to your child, how best to educate yourself, that's really what's going to make your homeschooling. And one of the things that I've noticed, especially as my oldest is now going into 7th grade, is there's a lot less content. And I've talked about how there's a lot less content because things get real, things get hard, things get a lot more effort, and the content isn't so pretty anymore. And I'm not saying that middle school can't and high school can't be fun and interesting and all those things. I think there's some really cool things coming up in middle school and high school that I'm a lot more excited to teach middle school and high school than I am for, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade. We're getting into some real cool stuff, some real like deep thinking, learning about your world and your kind of worldview on things. That's really cool stuff to get into. I'm not sure why people shy away from it. But one thing I've noticed is the older they get, the more middle school, high school content you get. And then the few that are out there are some that I will say are awesome. I love Arlene and Company. I will continue to watch hers. I found hers really inspirational. Of course, Mama Librarian, I love her. Her daughter is a year older than mine, so it's perfect that, we can kind of go back and forth with ideas. So I have, found inspiration absolutely on YouTube, but a lot of it is not really positive. A lot of it is, I've seen it very trendy, that just not finishing things, especially when the older kids using really aged down curriculum. So if you have a 7th, 8th grader using curriculum that's like 4th grade, I don't think is a good idea. And beefing it up with YouTube videos isn't enough. Our kids need to be doing age appropriate work. And I feel like as they get older and that gets harder, sometimes the parents get lazier when it comes to that, because it does take a lot of time and effort and planning. You're doing, a full load of high school credit. That's a lot of stuff, even if you're not, outsourcing a lot of it. If you're doing a lot of that yourself, it's a lot. Even outsourcing it, you have to find the different things and the credits. I get it, it's a lot, but it's really easy to be lazy in homeschooling. And it's really easy to be lazy in those early years and think, okay, well, I'm just going to get to it another day, or we'll finish this tomorrow, and tomorrow never happens. And I think there's a severe lack of accountability when it comes to homeschooling, that a lot of people aren't taking it very seriously. And it bothers me because I watch these end of the year review videos because I want to know about the curriculum and how it went, positive and negatives. And people haven't even touched it. They haven't even picked it up. And I get we have ups and downs in homeschooling. I've had those, absolutely. Life events, things happen. I get it. But the thing that makes your homeschooling is the day-to-day work you're doing. So if you're constantly coming to your kid unprepared, what do you think they're going to view education as? Do you think they're going to take it seriously if you're not taking it seriously? So you end up with these middle schoolers, high schoolers that don't want to do anything, that are giving you, this big attitude, like, why would I do this, when you've taught them over the years that it's not important. And I'm not saying my kids are the perfect homeschooling children. I'm not the perfect homeschooling parent, far from it. But I have also worked from the beginning on to establish respect between each other, to establish the importance of what we're doing. We're not just sitting here to do nothing. They see the time and effort I put into preparing to teach them. They respect that, and I respect their time too. And this idea that the bar has been lowered for homeschooling, I get comments usually in my end of the year reviews about, wow, you covered so much information, that's really great, and they're really positive. I do appreciate those videos, but it makes me wonder, am I really so far above the bar, or has the bar been lowered so much? Like, I don't feel like I'm doing a ton of information. We're done in a reasonable amount of time. We get through everything I have planned. My kids learn and progress, and it's a great homeschooling year. I don't think you can say you had a great homeschooling year when you haven't actually accomplished anything. And I'm not saying in order to have a good homeschooling year, you have to check every box and do every curriculum. But in order to progress, you actually have to move forward. You actually have to do that day-to-day work. And I don't think I'm not this perfect homeschool parent. I don't have this perfect homeschool children in front of me, but I'm doing the work. I'm doing it every single day. Do I want to do it every day? No. Sometimes it's really boring. Sometimes I would rather do, better things with my time, especially when I'm shuffling between 3 children, 3 different curriculum, 3 different subjects. It's a lot to juggle. But also, that's what I chose to take on when I chose to educate my kids. It's hard. It's boring sometimes. The day-to-day gets boring, like I said, and I think that's why a lot of people end up switching curriculum, not because necessarily it's not working for the child, because the parent gets bored, or you realize that doing this every day isn't so much fun. But sometimes that's education, sometimes that's learning. Repetitive information is learning too, and I think it's just, this idea is given online that if you're not enjoying yourself, that something's wrong, that this mundane part of life is not good, that it's supposed to be magical all the time, and your kids are supposed to listen the entire time. That's not realistic. I don't think it's painting a realistic picture of what it's like to get in there and get the work done and get through the year. Like that's the hard part. Education has wonderful parts. Home education has wonderful parts, but it's also some really boring, some really tedious, some really investigating kind of what's going on, why is this not working? There's a lot to it, and I guess that just doesn't make it seem fun, and maybe that's why it's not really widely talked about, is that no one wants to talk about how it's kind of boring and sometimes kind of not what you want to do. But again, if you choose to do home education, you're taking that responsibility on for yourself and your child. So I take it pretty seriously. So even though I don't maybe want to do this, or I'm not loving this particular curriculum, I find it kind of boring, I'm still going to do it because it's my job. So I don't think that I'm above the bar. I think the bar has just really been lowered, and I get really irritated, and that's one of the reasons I honestly don't watch a lot of content now, is constantly hearing people talking about not finishing this, or this didn't work, but making no steps to kind of solve it, to figure out what's going on with their child, what's the learning difficulty, what's the misconcept, not doing that investigating, not doing that work you need to do for yourself to be the educator is really frustrating. And just instead of switching to curriculum, that's not the answer. The answer is probably far deeper than that. So I wish that was just the reality of homeschooling. I'm not quite sure why it isn't. I don't think I'm unique in this situation of the things I see or think about. I think it's a lot of people feel similarly. And I think when we're constantly telling people it's okay not to do anything, that's not a positive thing to be sending. And again, life changes, things happen, get it. But that can't be your entire homeschool year. You need to kind of pick up the pieces and put things back together, because again, this is your job, this is your responsibility that you took on. So when we're constantly telling people, have grace with yourself, yeah, that goes so far, but also you gotta get your butt up and do the work too. Like, that's just part of being an adult. I guess I'm a little more tough love when it comes to this situation. I'm not gonna pat you on the back because you're a homeschooler. You gotta do the work to homeschool too. And I guess that's probably not very popular, but I'm not here for a popularity contest. I'm here to share my journey and the things I think about and how things are going. And I'm hopeful, really hopeful, that it's helpful to people, that they find information useful, resources I talk about, or just these videos where I'm talking about kind of my observations. I hope that's helpful, because I don't think we should constantly be telling people it's okay not to do anything. That's not homeschooling. That's not education. You don't progress in learning unless you do the steps to get there. And I feel like that's a better kind of message we should be telling people. It gets hard, it gets frustrating. Sometimes it's a lot of work, sometimes it's boring, but you can absolutely do this. If you're willing to put in the time and effort to do it, you can absolutely do that. I think that's a really positive message to say, instead of, well, that didn't work, so just forget about it, or, you didn't do math for 4 months, that's fine, they'll catch up. No. We need to have ideas of what we're doing. We need to have plans. We need to be prepared to teach. I think that's a really positive message, and there's a lot of positive things within that message. It's not about making people feel guilty. But if you're feeling guilty because you're not getting something done, I think you need to really think about why you're feeling guilty in those things. I don't feel guilty about not getting things done. I don't feel any guilt. When I'm at the end of my homeschooling journey, I will know, despite, how my kids turn out and education when they go to college and future careers and all that, I will know I did the best I could, that every day I brought my best self forward. And that is very comforting to me. I don't feel, fear the failure of the end of this journey, because I know no matter what, I would have put forth the best effort I could. And that's really comforting to me, that I don't have those videos where I feel guilty or I didn't do enough, because I'm doing the best I can, and I know I'm doing the best I can. I'm not letting things fall to the back burner or completely forgetting subjects or curriculum. I'm making it a priority in my life because it isn't just part of your life. It is a priority that needs to be done every single school day that you decide. And that can look different for every family. Absolutely. I'm not saying you have to be exactly like me for everything to work, but just my messaging is that it takes work, it takes effort, it takes time. It's not always going to be great. Sometimes it's going to be boring, and that's okay. That's part of homeschooling too. We don't have to have this pretty Pinterest picture, or sorry, Instagram picture of what homeschooling has to be. It will be different for you, and as long as you're doing your absolutely best, and being really real with yourself about what that best looks like, I think is the message we should be conveying on this platform. So those are my thoughts, kind of how YouTube influenced me in the beginning of my homeschool journey, kind of where I am now. Going on year 5, like I said, I don't consume a lot of content. I'm kind of just, trugging forward. I'd rather spend my time reading books about how the brain works, or education, or teacher resources than watching YouTube videos at that point. I'm not saying there's not value to them. I've gotten, like I said, those few I do watch, I've gotten really good ideas from them. I've, conversed with people in the comments or other YouTubers that I have found really beneficial. And you guys have even suggested things in the comments that have helped my homeschooling, so I do really like that community that's involved. I think we just need to be a little bit more real with each other and kind of set our standards a little higher. So if you have any specific questions about anything I mentioned, let me know in the comments down below, and make sure you check out Kara's video as well, and make sure to link that. As always, thank you for watching.